Hello, and welcome to Tech Lessons with Alvin. Now we're moving on to Subnetting Part 2, and you really need to watch the Part 1 to understand where we are right now. So without any further ado, let's get to business. So pick a familiar IP. We saw this in the previous video. 4.0/24. And looking at this, we understand. We know what we're looking at. Now comes the sweet part. It's sweet because it's easy now, right? I hope it's easy now. Now we have the perfect foundation, solid foundation. Nothing she can understand it. So what we're looking at, we can interpret it in so many ways. Excellent. So we need 3 network IDs from this, right? 3 whole new fresh networks from this. So how do we go about it? First, we can easily get our subnet mask from observing this section of IP address. And what this section tells us is that we have 24 bits on, and we know the total is 32. That means it's leaving 8. So we will not write down all 24 ones this time, but we'll take note of the 8 zeros. Good. So these are the 8 zeros. And then we'll have some ones to the left. And so since you need 3 networks, how will you get them? Now, don't get confused. Honestly, once you realize how you get it, you realize, so this is subnetting. Really? Seriously, it will be so easy for you. Now, remember the whole exponent thing we were discussing earlier? How 2 to the power 0 gives us a 1, and then 2 to the power 1 gives us a 2. In that order, it keeps going and growing until we end it with the 1 to 8. You remember this whole thing? Now, this is basically what you use, right, to find or to divide your target network, which is this, into these 3 networks. So since you need 3, look here and find which number is closest to 3. You have 1 here. 1 won't be of much help. 1 won't be of much help. We don't have 3. We can't get 3 from 1. We have 2. 2 is close, but it's short of 1. It's not 3. We don't need it. Okay. We have 4. So we are going with 4. Right? We are going with 4. And what is 4? 4 is 2. Let me write it on this side instead. 4 is 2 to the power 2. Right? That's 4. So what this means is this 2 here is telling us how many steps forward we are to move. So now this becomes a new line. Now, what have I just done? Take note, this 24 means what? We have 24 ones. So if I go on to change this to a 1, and then I'm getting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 zeros attached to the 1, making a total of 8 bits. What happens now is, instead of having 24, now we have 25 ones. So it changes to a /25. I hope you're following me. Excellent. So it changes to a /25. But with just this, we can't do much, can we? No, we can't do much. So in order to really get our two IPs, our three network IDs, take note, with this is either a 0 or a 1. We have only two options, so this is essentially equal to 2 to the power 1. But what we want is 4 IP addresses. So how about this instead? Right? So now we include 2 bits instead of 1, which translates to 1 1 0 0 0 0 0 0. Right? If you count it, you get 8. So this is better now. But since we've stepped into the last octet, and we've taken 2 bold steps into that new terrain. We add the 2 to the 24, and the new subnet here is 26. Excellent. /26. Right? So how does this translate to 4 network IDs? Well, I know you know, but let me just write it down so you have a look at it. What happens now is you have 4 possible combinations. Remember, it's probability. And so you could have 0 0 or 0 1 or 1 0 or 1 1. Then you add your zeros. Right, make sure everything, the zeros add up to 8 because you're dealing with 8 bits. Right, good. So again, we have the binary notation, and in binary we have network ID 1, network ID 2, network ID 3, and network ID 4. So we can solve for them all and just pick 3 from the bunch. It's cool, isn't it? So how do we now convert? We have already solved the question, just so you know. We've already solved it. The only thing left now is to convert it, right? So if you remember, again, back to this, right? This is more like the backbone of subnetting. We need to know our powers of 2. So it will be really cool if you could keep this in your mind, get it off head. So before maybe you see a question having to do with subnetting, immediately scribble this somewhere at the top of a page or at the bottom. 1 2 4 8 16 32 64 and 1 2. You definitely need it. You keep revisiting that part of the page, right? Anyway, I talk too much. So remember, right, we have about 8 dashes, right? So what this basically means is, if you line it up to the powers of 2, on the far left, the very first number there, if you recall, is 128. Right after 128 is 64, and then it goes on and on. But since we are dealing with just 2, since we trapped, or in a way kidnapped or captured just 2 bits out of the last octet, let's just pick these 2 numbers. There's where a lot of our math will be coming in, right? Good. So what this translates to is 192.168.4.0. remember to put in your /26, and we discussed why it's /26. All right, and then this 01 translates to 64, right? So you put in here 64/26. And then we move on to the next one, 1010. Okay, far left, very first number there, 1, that's 128. So it becomes 128/26. And now we have to add both 128 and 64 to give us 192/26. So your new network IDs become 192.168.4.0, 192.168.4.64, 192.168.4.128, and 192.168.4.192. That's it. That is subnetting. So it's like the cake. We have the cake. We have the cake, and the cake it's nice, it's sweet. Oh my god, it's so delicious. But we need to decorate it a bit, the icing and everything. So now we need to get the hosts. The network ID, we have them already. We have the network IDs. We need to find the broadcast ID and then the hosts. Right. So don't worry. We'll get to that in a second. So out of our 4 new network IDs, take note, the question only asked that we gave 3. So we'll end it at 192.168.4.128. Right? .128. So what do we do now? 192.168.4.0. This is your first network. Your next network, you could be asked, right? What is the next network after your first network? You need to know that. That is this one, 64. So in solving for your first network, what do you think will be the broadcast ID? What will the broadcast ID be? Now, the broadcast ID is equal to this 64, right? The last number in your next network minus 1, right? So minus 1. That makes your broadcast ID 192.168.4.63. And this is already your network ID. So right now we just solve for 2 things. Now you have your broadcast ID. I had to shorten it to BID, and then this is your network ID. And one more thing you may have to show are the number of hosts. So starting from 192.168.4.1 all the way to 192.168.4.62. Why 62? You can't include the broadcast ID. Remember, they are like the edges, the ends of the bread, right? We don't need them. So .62. Now these are the usable IPs. So I can be a host in this network and have an IP address as 192.168.4.1, right? And someone else could have the IP address of 192.168.4.62, right? No one will have .63, no one will have .0, right? And you can apply this same technique to solving for the other 2 network IDs. So we could pick .64, knowing that the next network will be .128, right? So how do we solve for that? So automatically 192.168.4.64, that's your network ID. Since the next network is 192.168.4.128, you take 1 away from the 128 and you get 127. So that means 192.168.4.127 is your broadcast ID. Remember, your broadcast ID is the subtraction of 1 from the number in the last octet of your next ID, as we can clearly see in this example. So your broadcast ID for your 192.168.4.64 network becomes 192.168.4.127. That's 128 minus 1. So you have your network ID and your broadcast ID. Whatever is in the middle is your host ID. And what you are left with is 192.168.4.65 ending at 192.168.4.126. And you can use this same method to solve for the final network ID. That's it. So you can you can actually end it here if you get it, right? If you get it, you're like, okay, cool, I understand, thanks. You can end it and move on. If you could like or subscribe, that would be nice. But then you can end it and move on. But then for those like me who need a little more convincing, let's try to solve one more example. Just one more. So here once again we have a very familiar network, 192.168. Oh, 168.4.0. Right, this is /24 network. So looking at this, the question, right, is telling you need 8 subnets. Now what are we doing? If you came here thinking, yo, I don't think we'll ever do, we'll ever be able to understand this, you open up, you are subnetting. Take a moment to absorb it. Like, be proud of yourself. If you stuck with me from part 1 to this last part, you should be good in this, right? You should be good in this. Have high expectations for you. So please take a moment, just realize that you are subnetting, alright? Okay, so you can pause and do that because I'm going on. And so now we know how to translate this to an IP, right? I could just rattle the numbers, but then since you already know the formula, we leave this out, since the 24 is suggesting that we have 24 bits on, which means everything here is a 1 and everything here is a 0. So we have 8 zeros. Alright, don't mind, don't even bother to count. I just did some scribbles there. So we need 8 subnets. So using our powers of 2, how can we get 8 subnets? Do we try 2 to the power 1? No, that will give us 2. Sorry for using this whole Dora the Explorer method. Should we do this? When the answer is so obvious. Okay, so obviously you don't use 2 to the power 1 or 2 to the power 2, but instead you go to 2 to the power 3, right? That's straightforward. It gives us an 8. So this 3 here tells us how many steps forward we are to move. And so we move 1, 2, 3. We draw a new line here. So take note, you are not just drawing the line, you are also adding up on the subnet here. Take note, this thing is called the CIDR, right? CIDR, classless interdomain routing, right? But don't worry about that. Just so we know the technical name for the /24s, right? It's the CIDR. Anyway, you add 3, the new 3 steps you took to this 24, and then the new subnet you'll be creating here is a /27. So after every network ID you discover, make sure you put your /27. So how many possible combinations can we get, right? Of course, you can get your 0, 0, 0. You can get 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1, 1. You add it up, 3, 6, that's 8. Exactly the number of subnets we need. At this point, you've already solved it, but then it has to make sense to someone. You will get it on, just by looking at it. You'll be able to continue and take further steps to answer the question. But now someone will need to know, what does this mean in numbers, right? So for that person's sake, we have to do some translation here. So this essentially translates to dot zero, right? This guy, take note. Now, you always need to get this down somewhere on your page. These numbers are really important. Always need to have them somewhere on the page when you're subnetting. Alright, and try and separate them with some lines. We need these guys. Right? Chemistry has the periodic table. Well, we have these guys. So have your dashes here. So in starting, remember, this is all from the right side. Sorry, from the left. This is all from the left side. So 0, 0, 0 is just 0. Now we come here, 0, 0, 1. So 132 is turned on. So this is dot 32. Sorry for the bad handwriting. 0, 1, 0, right? 64. This is dot 64. 0, 1, 1, right? That's 64 plus 32, which gives us 96, right? And 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0. So the 128 is turned on. We have that. You see how we are going? And I'm sure you have already predicted everything else. Like, oh, this guy's going too slow. Hurry up. That's good. That's the goal. And from 128, we go where? 160, right? 128 plus 32 gives us 160. And from there, we go to 192, right? 128 plus 1 plus 64 gives us 192. And then finally, when you turn 128, 64, and 32 on, essentially adding all of them, you get 224. Right? Now let me try and clean a portion of this off so we can take this a step further, right? Now this is all shorthand. Please don't do this. Don't do this. Right? This is all shorthand. You have to write it out in full because of the kind of stylus pen I'm using. But you have to write it all in full. 192.168.4.0 is your first subnet, right? From this given target, right? This is your first. So you write it in full. 192.168.4.0. You do the same for the rest till you get to 192.168.4.0. Now these are your 8 network IDs, your 8 subnets. Now you need to show the hosts, right? The range. And I don't need to overstate this. You get it already. So I'll just rattle the first 3 with the confidence that you are following along. So with the first one, you have 192.168.4.1 to 192.168.4.30. And we know why it's 30 and not 31. Dot 31 is the broadcast ID. So dot 30 is the last host. So if we're starting from 32 as our second network ID, we go 192.168.4.33 to 192.168.4.62. And the last one, since I'm doing just 3 out loud, will be 192.168.4.65 to 192.168.4.94. So you now know how to find the broadcast ID. You now know how to find the network ID. You now know how to find the host range, and by extension, the number of hosts in every ID, in every subnet, right? Every subnet will have the same number of hosts. And how many hosts would that be? Can you guess? Remember, you have 30, right? It would have been 32, but you took 2 away from the 32, and you have 30. That's your host range, your network ID, your broadcast ID, the next network, right? You may be asked, okay, what's the network that comes after 192.168.4.96? And quickly you say, oh, okay, it's 192.168.4.128, right? So that's the next network. In a more practical setting, these subnets will be used to divide different departments in an office complex, right? So you have a nice office building with newly set up laptops, but then they will need to designate certain departments to certain IP address subnets, right? That's where you come in to save the day with your bird knife. Right? Now you have separated everyone into different networks. It makes things smoother and easier. Now, once again, please take a moment and just breathe in the new networking air, and just nod your head. If you can afford to get a nice chilled drink, I mean, water is a drink. You could get water if you have cold water, or if you don't drink cold water, get something refreshing. Just celebrate a bit, because wow, this is not an easy thing to do, and you have done it. Well done. You made it this far, from part 1 to part 2, and I've shared a lot, and I really hope, and badly hope that you've learned a lot. Now it's been Tech Lessons with Alvin, where we discussed subnetting, and I hope to see you again in the next video.